Welcome to Our Highest Work, a podcast where we are gathering and sharing the best ideas for spiritually based life success. My name is George Cow, and on this episode, I am honored to be joined by Dr. Stafford Betty. So if you watched or heard the previous, the episode 39 actually, you actually heard a few of the passages, some of the inspiring passages that I got from Dr. Betty's books. And the book that I first read from Stafford Betty was called The Afterlife Unveiled. And it is truly one of the best books I've read about the afterlife. It is both inspirational, very well researched, and very well written, and very readable as well. So I highly recommend those of you who haven't yet read it you can get it on you can get it off of any major bookstore. You can also, I use the Kindle version, so I just buy it and have instant access to it. So I guess the way I'll introduce Dr. Betty, and I'll have him introduce himself a bit more, is that he is a tenured professor in the California State University system, and he has been researching religion, spirituality, and the afterlife for 30 years. And so he has read more books and manuscripts than most of us have on this stuff. And he has been able to piece together the most credible research there is about the descriptions of the afterlife. So without further ado, Dr. Betty, I'm so glad to have you here with us.
Oh, thanks, George. It's good to be here.
Yeah. So I guess the first question that I'd love to start with is when did you start researching all this stuff? I mean, I saw somewhere in your bio it was like 30 years ago, but what kind of got you interested in this?
Wow. One way to put this is that this life here is relatively short. As a matter of fact, it's infinitesimally short compared to the life that follows. And just in terms of time, it seems logical to look into that which will take an awfully long time, that which will endure for a long time, which is what the afterlife will do compared to this short life on Earth. So it seems to me to be nonsensical to basically overlook what will be so much longer an experience than the relatively short experience we have here. That's one of the reasons. The other reason is that I was indoctrinated from a very young age to look to the future, to look beyond this world, growing up Catholic and being taught by nuns and putting a lot of emphasis on heaven and hell and so forth. And so, I guess that had something to do with it too. Though I'd like to think I've gotten well past that, and I believe I have.
Yeah, absolutely. And the descriptions you write about heaven and hell in your books are very different from what most of us grew up who are Christians or Catholics.
Sure.
Yeah. So I guess maybe a follow-on question to this is, as you started doing your research on this, how did you know which sources to weigh more heavily than other sources? These days, especially I would say probably in the last 30, 40 years, there's been a lot of what we might call channeling. Everything from channeling spirit guides to channeling aliens. And they describe the spirit world and the afterlife in sometimes very unique ways. So how do you come to decide which sources to weigh more heavily?
Yeah, that's a great question, George. That's the question that the skepticism within each of us should bring to the fore. That's not an easy thing to accomplish. It does take a lot of experience to choose which mediums are the ones you're going to trust. And all I can say is that I think I have developed a good nose for sniffing out the ones that are legitimate. There have been consensuses prior to my arriving on the scene about which are the classic sources, the classic channels, and a number of them come from Britain. described as the heyday of psychical research. There were so many extraordinary accounts of the world to come, given allegedly by spirits speaking through very reputable, respected mediums. And one of the things that I'm looking for is commonality, and you find that in these sources. There's a remarkable, let's put it this way, congruence between these sources. And if I find something that is just simply incongruous, I should say, I'm a little skeptical of that. Or if I find something that has nothing surprising about it, I think, oh, here's a person who's just making a buck off of the legitimate sources and pretending to be something that he or she is not. And there are people like that. So, after you've read dozens and dozens of these accounts, and you begin to feel, oh, the next account I read is not going to tell me anything particularly new. It'll have a few surprises, but nothing radically new. Then, you get the feeling I've got things relatively figured out. It seems to me that we are now at a point where we can understand quite a bit about the world to come. Not that there won't be surprises, not that the ultimate experience won't be quite different from the descriptions that our English language provides us with, but generally speaking, our English language, which is used by spirits speaking through mediums, is consistent across these accounts, which leads me to believe that they're describing a real place.
Mm. Yes, wonderful. And of course, these mediums, when you say there's commonality, it's not like they all read each other and therefore what they're saying is really just coming out of their subconscious memory of what they've read.
Right. That's a problem. There's always the possibility of a series of copycat experiences. Maybe the first great medium way back in 1856 was read by other mediums, and they, quite sincerely take in this material and begin to think that this material is coming from a source that it's not. It might well be coming from their own unconscious rather than from a spirit source speaking through them. There's always that possibility. There are a number of reasons for thinking that is not true, however. And I don't know if you want me to go into them, but I can do that. It'll take a little bit of time. But there are definitely reasons why we can surmount those kinds of radical skeptical moments when we wonder about our sources. And we have to wonder about our sources. That's an essential thing that we must do.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I think that probably most of the audience members here are open-minded enough to be willing to just go ahead and take a look at the views of the afterlife instead of having to prove these things. And I know from my own research, I've done a lot of research into the evidential part of this stuff, and I consider myself to be more intelligently skeptical than the average person who hasn't looked at this stuff. And I highly believe I highly believe this stuff because it's just like you said, there's too much commonality, there's too much unexplainable phenomena that a lot of the disbelievers are holding on to a scientific worldview that they haven't even looked at the stuff. And so anyway, I think we could probably move past that at this point. But I do want to encourage those of you listening live, if you have any questions for Dr. Stafford Betty about any of his books, any of his research, please feel free to comment directly on the live video page, and I'll be happy to bring that through. Dr. Betty, maybe we can move on to the content itself, the truly exciting stuff. So first of all, what do you? Maybe we could talk a bit about the transition from here to there, and then we'll talk about what you've learned about what's over there, and then maybe we can end on what you've learned about how then shall we live here. So tell us a bit about what you've learned about what happens. What might we expect of all the? And by the way, how many books? How many books do you think would you say you've read on all the stuff?
Oh goodness!
It's
Well,
yeah.
I'm looking at 3 library shelves over there.
Okay.
Desk right now.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good start, and they look pretty worn too.
Yeah.
Plus, I have 30 more on my desk surrounding me, and they're really beat up. They're the ones that I used in my most recent research to write this most recent book, which is called Heaven and Hell Unveiled.
Yeah, I'm
from the world of spirit.
I'm actually in the middle of it right now, and I'm loving it. So.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good.
So.
Yeah. Well, you're wondering what it's like to die, according to these accounts. I'm just going to read to you one short paragraph that comes from a source. Actually, this was written in 1958 from a woman who was known. This isn't some fictional character. She was an upper-class English woman, and she had this to report, speaking through the famous Irish medium Geraldine Cummins in 1958. She says, "After I woke up from the sleep of death," and there's a brief sleep typically, "and following its uneasy dreams, some pleasant, some nightmares, my father and mother appeared to welcome me. Then your father," she's writing to her son through Miss Cummins, "and my sisters came, but my end was my beginning. I was too overjoyed at getting a glimpse of George, your brother, so father and mother soothed me, calmed me, took charge of me, and gave me my first sense of locality and environment. It was all rather gradual, time of oblivion and unawareness. Then those two were there beside me, my parents almost like doctor and nurse, and they guided me back into real consciousness." So that's just one of, hundreds of accounts that are out there to be read from these spirits speaking through authentic mediums about their dying experience. My second chapter actually deals with that experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I've also read, I'm forgetting which book now, that the mindset that we have as we pass over, in other words, in our dying moments, where our mind and heart is incredibly important. Do you want to speak to that a bit?
Yeah, that's overdone. You find a lot of emphasis on that in Eastern religions, in Hinduism in particular. It's almost like a kind of a doctrine. You've got to be thinking the right thought precisely at the moment of death. If you want to think the best thought, then think God or something of that sort. We know that Gandhi said his dying words were "Hey Ram," which means "Oh God." So he remembered to put his mind right in the right place when he was being shot by 3 bullets. But really, it's not the final thought that's critical. It's the whole character of the person. What kind of a being are you? What have your habits created? What have your choices? What choices in other words, what habits have been created by a whole lifetime of choices? It's the character that you are that will determine the degree of happiness, the degree of comfort when you enter the world after death. It has that has anything to do with the kind of place you end up at. You can, if you truly are a scoundrel, then you're not going to end in a happy environment. You'll be probably finding yourself in one of the darker places of the afterworld. I'm not going to call them hell. That's a little bit misleading, but these are not happy environments, and these are environments that you're going to have to grow out of, and it's going to be painful to grow.
Yeah.
So that would be the way I would deal with that question, George.
Okay. Well, since you touched on the darker environments, maybe we can speak a little bit about that.
Sure.
So the traditional thoughts of heaven and hell that most people, growing up in the Christian world believe it's eternal damnation, it's fire and brimstone. What is your research telling us about what that realm is like?
Well, first of all, there is no such thing as eternal hell. The mistakes let's put it this way: Earth's religions, particularly a certain form of Christianity, a more fundamentalist type of Christianity, makes fairly serious mistakes about the nature of the world to come. in general. It seems to me that many fundamentalist Christians think that it's going to be heaven or hell, and each of those states is going to be eternal. There won't be much growth, if any. If you go to heaven, then you sort of are just happy somehow for the rest of eternity. And if you go to hell, you're miserable for the rest of eternity. No growth possibility out of it. All of that is denied universally by our spirit sources. The way judgment really happens and what it's for is described in detail in almost all of these accounts. There's never some sort of a God sitting on a throne with a scepter in hand, assigning us the proper destination, either heaven or hell. Nothing like that is ever described. No one meets this supposed God sitting on a throne according to our spirit sources. So what does the judging, and we are judged, we're judged by ourselves. The anguish of judgment is real and sometimes terrible, depending on our deeds, depending on our habits, depending on the kind of character that we have formed over a lifetime. So there's no escaping the conscience in the afterworld. You can decide not to deal with the conscience, but if you decide not to deal with it, not to confront your evil doing, not to feel repentance for it, not to do what's necessary to change the kind of character that you've made, you're going to languish in one of these dark places. But there's always the possibility of emerging, and there's plenty of help available for those who want to emerge, want to move ahead, want to move out of those dark places into the light. But judgment itself does not come from some sort of angry deity or some sort of judgmental deity. There's nothing like that. And incidentally, there is no, many people think that their religion is the only way. That is a delusion, according to our spirit sources. No spirit source speaks in that way. As a result, there are no religious wars in the afterlife. Mm-hmm. Pluralism reigns. You're going to expect to find sectors that are Christian, churches. You're going to find other sectors that are Muslim, minarets. And you find basically people of good character in the heaven worlds. And the worlds that are described as heavenly are lower heavenly worlds. There are many, many levels of heaven. But we start out pretty low, most of us do, almost all of us do, if we are ready for the light. And then we move up if we want to work. And the way you move up is by serving, and by loving, by sharing, by giving. And so there's plenty of opportunity for soul growth on the other side. I should say that heaven is not a place where you simply languish and kick back and cruise. It's a place where there are jobs to do, and there's an enormous amount of work to do over there. And loving service is the way to progress.
That's wonderful to hear that. So, well, speaking of the jobs that are to be done there, the work that's to be done there, can you speak about that a little bit from your research?
There is, well, one of the most common jobs, and keep in mind that there is no end to the variety of tasks that need to be performed over there, or interest groups where souls gather to learn new things, or to press ahead, and to help us back on Earth through telepathic communications that we are not even aware of are coming from that spirit source. But just to give you an example, there are many women in particular who enjoy being mothers in life, and they were good mothers, and they find themselves drawn to the kind of work that they found enjoyable on the Earth. It's just natural. That sort of, in other words, your character carries over. You're thoroughly intact. You don't become some kind of a different being just because you die, just because you dump the body. So if you are a loving mother, if you've enjoyed that, then there's plenty of work to be done over there. There's an enormous amount of work to be done over there because there are so many spirit orphanages. And a spirit orphanage is children who have died before their parents. It's sort of orphaning in reverse. The parents don't die first, the child dies. And so who's going to take care of the child? Does God take care of the child? No. Spirits do. Other spirits. Spirits who enjoy mothering. And they school the kids. The kids grow up under the loving care of these, you might say, nurses and teachers who bring them along. So nothing magical happens to the child just because he dies. If he's 4 years old when he dies, he'll be 4 years old over there, and he'll have to grow up over there rather than over here. And there are plenty of helpers who enjoy doing that kind of work. That's just one possibility.
Now, that's an interesting scenario about the child who dies, because usually those of us who imagine a spirit world, we imagine that, and in fact, this is an interesting question that I've always had, is that near-death experiences often have a different view about the afterlife than mediumistic communication. I have a theory on that, and I'd love to know what you think about it. My theory is that when we read about near-death experiences, we often instantly see the astral cities, the crystal libraries, the sort of the really far off stuff. Well, of course, we see that we see ourselves above our bodies. We go through this tunnel towards the light, and we're in a loving light. And so when people read these near, they're like, okay, so that's how we die. We die, and then we go through this tunnel, and then we're in this bright light, and this full understanding, full love, and that's just the way it goes forever. And yet the mediumistic literature is telling us that the transition is more gradual. And I mean, my theory on that is somehow when we have a near-death experience, we're somehow catapulted or given a glimpse of what's much further along. But I don't know. I mean, any thoughts you have on that?
Yeah. No, I first of all, the near-death experience is just that. There's a huge difference between someone who has, you might say, gotten a very brief glimpse of the heaven worlds over there and then comes back to describe them. That's a very different experience from a person or a spirit who's been over there for months, even years, even centuries. Who are the authorities? The spirits or the person who's had a 5-minute entry experience into the other world? I don't see the great dissimilarity that you see, George. Most of the descriptions that come to us from the other world through mediums are of this heavenly world that you've just described. Mm-hmm. People like you, hopefully me, and most of your listeners, who are decent people, we're going to go into a better world than anything we've seen here on Earth. Mm-hmm. It's going to be far pleasanter, but there will be jobs to do. There will be tasks to perform. If there were not, that place would quickly become boring.
Right.
And so I think what you're thinking about is the beauty that is so often described, the crystal cities, the buildings, and so forth. All of that is described by our spirit friends working through mediums. But one thing that is almost never mentioned by the NDEers is the whole notion of the jobs that we have to do over there.
Right.
The labor that awaits us, of the growing that only challenge can bring forth out of the soul.
That's right.
And that's only because there simply isn't enough time to go into that. All they're doing is getting a snapshot.
They're tourists.
Not the real thing.
They're tourists. They don't live and work there.
They don't live and work there. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And I must say that the heaven worlds, you might think, oh my goodness, you mean we just have to go work some more? It's easier over there to work. We don't get tired in the same way that we do here. We don't get hungry. They're not nasty jobs to do. The garbage doesn't have to be collected.
Right.
None of that. It's all very interesting work. It has a lot to do with counseling. a lot to do with talking to people in groups who have common interests. That you could be, you might be involved in a science group. You might be involved in a theological group. There's just all kinds of possibilities over there. So it does involve. In other words, we're not omniscient just because we die. We have far better minds than we have here. Our brains are like IQs of 300. We grasp things more clearly and quicker. We remember better. But we do have to work things out, and we do have to get along with each other. And so things don't come automatically as you might think that they do, and you might even think that they should because it's heaven after all. But remember that most people think of heaven as a place where you just sit back and nothing has to happen. You don't have to do anything except passively enjoy.
Right.
Maybe even look at God for the rest of eternity in the beatific vision, as I was taught as a child. But that would get very old in a hurry if you really think about it. We need diversity. We need challenge. We need movement in our world, and heaven provides an inestimably lengthy pattern of progress for those who want it. No one has to go up. No one has to do this work. But those of us who want to move towards the light, move towards God, if you will, are going to be tested. And, we will see what we're capable of. There are a lot of lazy souls over there, just as there are a lot of lazy souls here. So no one is forced to do anything. It's up to us to use our freedom smartly.
Yeah. But part of the work that I've read about, partly in your books, is also there are a lot of art there. So those who are interested in visual art, music, poetry, name it, there's plenty of work to be done there too.
Yeah, there is, and the supreme art of the afterlife is music. Mm-hmm. The descriptions of the concerts that await us over there are simply mind-blowing. Mm-hmm. Words, you can see the spirits trying to get across the majesty and the awesomeness of music over there as it is enjoyed. The instruments are different. The source, the inspirational quality of the music is far, far advanced over even the best of music that we have here. And you mentioned art and architecture. All the things that we enjoy doing here are available over there, and the material that we work with is more manageable. It's easier. The material is astral. It's not physical in the way that ours is. You don't have to take hammer and saw to make a building, for example. But you do have to work on the concept of the building, and you do have to learn how to move astral matter and keep it in place and make it as beautiful as possible. So it's not as if it's easy in every sense of the word, but it's not grueling and sweaty in the way that our building is.
Oh, I see. Yeah, no, that's great description. Maybe we can now move our attention to what this all says about this life, and one of the questions that I would love for you to speak to is how is this relevant to those of us here who aren't psychic, who don't see spirits, and who can just read books like yours and imagine the afterlife? Tell us what's, for those of us who can't see spirits, right? Tell us what's, from your research, is really going on, even right this very moment, all around us.
Yeah. Let me ask you, George. Are you gifted with second sight, or with a sixth sense? That's another way to put it. Do you have that kind of ability?
Not that I know of.
Then you would. Well, I don't either.
Okay.
So we're on par with each other. I would love to have that experience, but if we did have it, and I've talked to many students over the course of a long life, and a few of them have leveled with me and kind of sheepishly come up after class and said, "Dr. Betty, I'd like to talk to you about something," and they've told me some remarkable stories. One of the things spirits on the other side, is that our world is surrounded. I mean, it's filled with spirits. There are spirits of all kinds here. First of all, there are the spirits of a more negative variety. They are sometimes referred to as earthbound. They're attracted back to their physical experiences. It might well be that they were addicted to alcohol, and they were alcoholics, so they died alcoholic, and they died perhaps in drunken stupor. That person is not going to cease to be an alcoholic just because he dies. He's going to want booze, and that person is going to gravitate back towards the earth and will attempt to drink through other physical, living alcoholics, sort of using their body, so to speak, sort of smelling the booze in the bar where the alcoholic is enjoying his whiskey. So there is the fact, I think it's a fact, that our world is chock full of spirits who shouldn't be here, who really belong in the light, who, however, are not comfortable in that environment and are dragged down by their own inner, by their own character to a lower realm, namely our realm, where they inflict mischief on people who are already having a difficult enough time beating an addiction. All they do is feed the addiction by drinking through them. On the other hand, there are many other spirits who are our helpers, and or who just love us and want to be around us and miss us, and come down just to sit next to us. There may be somebody sitting next to you right now, George, or next to me. We don't have the ability to see this spirit, but maybe my mother wants to come and see how I do on this broadcast or on this podcast. And so she might be sitting in the chair or standing next to me. I don't see her, but the spirits uniformly describe the ability of spirits who love us to come and visit us and just be near us. And when we're in trouble, to send us help through what we might call prayer in reverse, through good ideas, telepathically administered. And so there are all kinds of possibilities. One of my students described what it's like to go to the mall and just watch the people walking. 9/10 of them are people like you and me, but 1/10 of them are spirits who are just drifting along, and they are very easy to spot for a person with that gift.
Wow.
And they just, they mingle with us, and they are there for whatever reason, just enjoying the stroll. Perhaps they're just having an Earth memory, and they're missing Earth a little bit. Maybe they're a little homesick for it, or maybe they're just earthbound. They're not harmful. They're completely harmless, but they're there. And so we get this description quite frequently.
Now, can you tell us about the helper spirits that we have around us? We indeed, besides those relatives or those who we knew in this life, the guardian angels, some people call them.
Yeah, the spirits universally describe what we used to call guardian angels, and we can call them spirit guides or guardian spirits. And they are there. Each of us is assigned one or more to look after us. We can lose them if we, for example, are showing no sign of any interest in awakening to a spiritual culture. They will drift away. But for those of us who let's put it this way, let's put it this way, those of us who have a spiritual life will continue to attract our spirit guides, and they will be there for us. They will keep us, they will protect us from physical danger. It's one of the things that they do. They will inspire us when we need inspiration. We might think that our prayers are being answered by God because we address our prayers to God. It's not the way it works. The people who help us are the people who love us, the people who perhaps have been assigned to be our spirit guides. They hear those prayers. They intercept are so ineffectively or incompletely answered is that the spirit helpers are not omnipotent. There's only so much they can do. There's only so much they're allowed to do. And generally, it's not enough to get us exactly what we prayed for, because usually what we pray for is not really the best for us. We usually ask for more than we would be profiting from if we had it. So yeah, there are plenty of references to the guardian angel concept. We each have one if we're decent people.
Yeah, yeah, and the prayer is an interesting question because, and I've been curious about it and sometimes confused by it for a long time. What does your research say about prayer? To whom do we pray? I mean, some people pray to God, some people pray to their guardian angel, some people pray to saints, some people pray to ancestors. Your thoughts on this?
Well, spirits send prayers to their God, usually in the form of a glad and spontaneous act of adoration. So we're talking about, let's put it this way, we're talking about celebrations, worship on the other side. Worship doesn't cease. In fact, worship is far more glorious over there and far more joyous. It's far less laborious than it is over here. So prayers are sent by those who love God to their God. They don't see God any more than we do, but they are closer to God, and they feel God's presence around them. Oftentimes they describe that. And so spirits send prayers to God, usually in the form of a glad and spontaneous act of adoration. They're not asking for things. They're just delighting in the presence of God, in the light that surrounds them, in the beauty of their heavenly world. Spirits also receive prayer. They receive prayer from us. They pick up most of Earth's calls for help and respond in whatever way they think best. But it goes the other way also. Spirits welcome prayer for them from Earth. That's when Catholics pray for the souls in purgatory. You know that concept.
Right.
Such prayers can be a great source of comfort for the spirit being prayed for. It lets them know they are remembered and loved by their children and friends. Love doesn't cease at death, as we know, and prayers are the best way to express it for the dead. So prayer is very important. I think it's a great mistake for certain Protestant denominations to refrain from praying for the dead. The logic being, either the spirit, either the soul who has died is in heaven and doesn't need our prayers, or is in hell and would only be tortured by our prayers. And so, even in funeral services, they don't pray for the dead. And all of the spirit accounts I've read say that that's a great mistake, that prayer is greatly appreciated by the deceased. They want to be remembered, and the way that they're usually remembered is by prayers being said for them.
Thank you for that. What would you say? Now, one of the things you've said in your books is that service is incredibly important for growth on the other side, but also growth on this side. And I know a lot of people personally who feel like they've been serving all their life, and they feel tired, and feel like they don't want to serve anymore. I mean, and this happens even in a given day. In a given day, we might feel like, I've done so much today, I don't want to do any more. But there's some people might feel like it's been like their life, and now it's time for them to get as much as they can, which is what a lot of us believe about retirement. But any advice you've read from the spirit guides on this?
Sure. If a person is a server, and I wish I were more inclined to be a servant myself. I think it's the most important thing that we do on earth in order to grow our spirits. Well, let's put it this way. Maybe just as important is just knowledge. Doing what we need to gain knowledge. That's important also. But we also need to express our love. So love and knowledge, those are the two. Wisdom and love, those are the things that I pray for. And I think that we need to work at becoming wise and good. We also need to work at being good servants of each other. And that's just a fundamental way to prepare oneself for the delights of the heavenly worlds. We will be rewarded for our work. Those of us who make sacrifices will be, you might say, recompensed or compensated for those works. Will be appreciated. There will be justice on the other side. There's a perfect justice. As a matter of fact, justice is so perfect over there that you don't even need mercy. The concept of mercy sort of dies out. So those of you who are working your life away in the service of others will find yourself recompensed for all of that work. But you will continue to want to serve in whatever way you can if you are in the habit of service. Remember that service on the other side doesn't have the same gruesomely laborious feel about it that it does here. It doesn't result in deep fatigue, for example, or dirtiness, or any of those kinds of things that we associate service with here. So service is a great way to prepare for the world to come, and there will be plenty more of service, but a much more interesting environment.
Yeah.
So I hear you, and all I can say to those folks is just continue to give loving service. Try to love those you serve, and that's the best advice I can give anyone. Service is not a good thing if you don't love the person that you are serving, in kind of a Mother Teresa sort of way. That's about as good as an ideal as I can find.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And on a similar point, and you've talked about this idea of recompense. A lot of times we feel like we gave, in this, I think we sense a cosmic justice, and we oftentimes expect that justice to happen right here in this life. For example, if I did something good for someone, I expect that they should do something good back to me. And then and a lot of us feel like we've done a lot of good to other people, and we haven't received here in this life the goodness back from other people, and that's when we get tired, right? It's like, oh, I don't want to give anymore. I keep giving. Some service providers say, well, I'm undercharging. I help some people, I don't even charge them, and then now I'm sick and tired of it, and I don't want to do that anymore. And I sometimes feel sad to that, because I want to say to them, actually, the karmic profit you are gaining from serving someone for free or undercharging is far greater than you can imagine. Unfortunately, you can't see it right now, and you can't experience it right now, but you'll be so grateful for it when you pass on to the other side. So I try to remember that myself. I try to remember that when I serve someone, I don't have to get something back from them.
Right. That's a tough lesson to learn. And I hear you. I think probably all of us have felt underappreciated at times, and perhaps throughout most of our lives. But the spirits tell us that there is a direct cause and effect relationship between virtuous, loving, sharing, giving, living in this world and a happy life in the next. Those who, on the other hand, are cruel are not going to experience a happy life when they die. They may eventually, but they're going to have to grow beyond their cruelty and their selfishness if they're going to move into the light-filled realms that we typically call heaven. They will be in worlds that can loosely be described as hellish. We're not talking about burning sulfur. We're just talking about where spirits of a selfish or cruel sort hang out together. And it's not a great place to live. So, those who really give and give are going to be recompensed. That's all I can say. That's what the spirits tell us over and over again.
Wow. Oh, thank you so much. So, Dr. Betty, I am for sure going to be putting the links to your website, your books. I just saw recently that you've been blogging consistently on Huffington Post recently.
Yeah, I just started doing that in March, and that's been really quite a joy.
Yeah.
I enjoy writing essays, and it's just a wonderful thing that I was actually allowed to do that. I was surprised. I didn't know that my message would be tolerated. But it turns out that Arianna Huffington herself is a committed believer in a world to come.
Wow. Interesting. I didn't know that.
She's gone public.
Wow. Wow. Well, Dr. Betty, do you have any? Given that you've read so much, I wonder what are your current favorite sources of wisdom? Maybe recent books you've read, or recent websites you visited, or things like that.
Sure. I think that 4 books are particularly good. First of all, I will tell you that I strongly recommend my own most recent book, Heaven and Hell Unveiled: Updates from the World of Spirit.
I do too, actually.
Who want to know what it's like to live over there and to progress over there. This is a book that does the job like none other I've ever read.
You actually wrote a book you wanted yourself.
The Afterlife Unveiled. That book has been duplicated quite a few times. There are quite a few books that talk about just what it's like to be over there. But this most recent book talks about the religion that's actually practiced over there, the way to progress, the way to evolve. So I would say that's an important book for those who are looking to what will be expected of us over there once we die. But closer to home, I love Michael Tim's book, The Articulate Dead. And in this book, he gives reasons for trusting mediums, and he does it by looking at evidential. In other words, he shows over and over again in 100 places that information is coming through mediums that the mediums would have no way of knowing, that the spirits themselves would be expected to know. That's a wonderful book for gaining confidence in the ability of mediums to block out their own biases and bring through the spirits seeking to articulate through them. That's a wonderful book, The Articulate Dead by Tim, T-Y-M-N. Another, my favorite book up to this point is Chris Carter's Science and the Afterlife Experience. Carter is a Cambridge graduate. He's a fine philosopher. And he, in this book, obliterates the metaphysical materialist. That is to say, the person who is convinced that the only reality is material. That's what I mean by a materialist in a philosophical sense. And he, just in chapter after chapter, shows that that's just not a workable hypothesis. It just overlooks too much of the human experience to be true. And I completely agree with the line that he takes here, and have written somewhat along the same lines myself when I'm in a more philosophical mood. Chris Carter, then, Science and the Afterlife Experience. And then there's this famous book that was written by Dr. Eben Alexander called Proof of Heaven. It's about his extraordinary near-death experience. That's had hundreds of thousands of readers. It's very well written, and I don't think it's as important as the other books, but it's just a great read. And a book that's much more important is Pim Van Lommel. He talks about the near-death experience in particular. He talks about, the title is Consciousness Beyond Life, the science of the near-death experience. And so that's what it's about. It's about the science of the near-death experience and why we can trust the near-death experience as not being some kind of hallucination, but as a very real entree into the world to come, if only very briefly. So those are 4 that I would recommend strongly, including my book, The Fifth. Yeah, I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I have been recommending The Afterlife Unveiled for years now. I guess ever since I read it, and I'm reading now The Heaven and Hell Unveiled. I have to say that somehow I feel like I like The Afterlife Unveiled better. Maybe it's because it was the first one I read, but I felt it was such a concise and inspirational read. And of course, Heaven and Hell Unveiled goes even deeper and gives us, like you said, updates. So I really love both books, and I will certainly be linking them.
I hear you. The Afterlife Unveiled is a better place to start, actually.
Right.
But after you've read that book and you want to find out not what it's like over there, but what is expected of you if you're going to evolve, if you're going to be spiritually ambitious, if that's what you are interested in, then the second book is going to be the place to go eventually for you. So I would recommend the books in that order, quite honestly. I hear you. The Afterlife Unveiled, the first book, which was published 3 years ago, is the one I use in the college classroom.
Right. Which I just have to say, I really admire your courage. I mean, you are a tenured professor, is that right?
Yeah, I am. So it doesn't take too much courage because I am tenured.
Well,
but I'm also pretty isolated because most professors really don't want anything to do with what I stand for, which means they don't really much want to have anything to do with me personally, and that hurts, I must say. But nevertheless, I feel so incredibly blessed for having come into, for being able to access this wonderful information. It's deeply inspiring to me, and it gives me a sense that life is blessed, and that life is going somewhere, that it's meaningful, that it's good, and that it's going to lead to something even better. I think that's a great way to live life, and I see my colleagues not having that blessing, and I don't envy them, even though I feel isolated by them.
Yeah. Hopefully you are finding some fellowship with other academics who have done the research and believe that there's the world to come.
Yes, no question about it. There are plenty of people like me, but they just don't happen to be very many of them here where I work.
Yeah.
They are to be found at other universities, and I have made contact with them. And literally daily, we exchange emails back and forth. So many of them also are experiencing a good deal of isolation because of their views, and have been persecuted. I think that's the right word. Not physically persecuted, but mentally persecuted and denied promotions and so forth, because it became known too early in their careers what they were really all about. Fortunately for me, I was already tenured and full professor by the time I began to write about the afterlife.
Yes.
Would have gotten me fired if I'd started to do that 30 years ago. So I just quietly grew and evolved and into what I am today. And now, I say politely tolerated. People are nice to me, and some people are actually friendly. Usually the staff rather than fellow professors.
Yes.
And so, I really am not sure what they think in their heads, but I do feel that I am tolerated, and I can live with it. I have to live with it, and that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you for what you do, and I do feel like your professorship is not just local to the students, but you have students like me all around the world. And your colleagues
I hear
are.
from you also, and it's wonderful to hear. I did a program on Coast to Coast, which is a big radio program that goes all over the world, and I had email just pouring in from more than 50 people from all around the world, and asking for further clarification, asking for leadership, and it's wonderful. I don't really feel that alone. I just feel alone physically on the campus.
Right.
And I can deal with that. It's all right. My life is so blessed in other ways that I can't seriously complain, and I don't.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Betty, do you have any other additional words to share with us as we close this episode?
Well, let me just read to you the concluding paragraph in the first book, The Afterlife Unveiled.
Great.
It's a short paragraph. It won't take more than 30 seconds.
Sure.
I say, imagine what our world would be like if young men and women were given the vision summarized here. Abraham Lincoln worked relentlessly to show young America that democracy at its best far surpassed any other form of government that the world had seen. His aim was to disseminate human happiness among the masses, former slaves, immigrants, Catholics, Jews. The spirits we've surveyed are inspired by something similar. They have a vision for bettering our world, lifting the great mass of drifting, purposeless humanity toward a goal worthy of their native splendor. I hope they succeed. So I would leave it at that.
Oh, thank you. So, Dr. Betty, if folks wanted to connect with you, what would your recommendation be?
Well, they can always email me at sbetty@csub.edu.
Okay, wonderful.
And I'll get back to them.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, it's been a joy to have you with us and sharing these thoughts. I hope to have you back at some point, maybe when your next book comes out. Are you still writing?
You know, I am, and I'm not sure exactly what it's going to be. It's one of two things, but so I won't go into it. But I'll be working on the next book. You can be sure of that. George, I want to also say something about you. You have obviously progressed a great deal since our last conversation.
Yeah.
I think maybe 2.5 years ago or
That's
so.
right. That's right.
You've done your reading, and I can tell by the questions that you ask how deep you've gone into this, and it's been a much greater joy being interviewed by you this time than it was the first time, and so I congratulate you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I really, your books have made a profound shift within me, and it really has literally changed my life, and it's changed my business, and so I really want to thank you for that. So with that, let me just end the episode by always reminding all of you to keep your thoughts positive, keep your heart open, and until the next time, be well.